Dandavat pranams to all, and thank you for continuing this challenge with me, giving me your good company. So we are continuing this Upadeshamrita challenge. We've reached verse number 6. Is it 6? Yes, verse number 6. Very important verse. Dṛṣṭaiḥ svabhāva-janitair vapuṣaś doṣair prākṛtatvam bhakta-janasya paśyet gaṅgāmbhasāṁ khalu budbuda-phena-paṅkair brahma-dravatvam apagachchhati nīra-dharmaiḥ. I'll read that translation. Do not consider devotees in this world to be mundane as a result of observing faults produced by their nature or in their body. The water of the Ganges never loses its spiritual nature as liquid spirit because of bubbles, foam, and mud, all of which are natural in water. So this is a really, really important point, which is also very difficult, and also something very relevant, very practical in our day-to-day life of devotion, practicing bhakti, service life in a community atmosphere. So it's an important warning to overlook the material faults, the material failings that we may see in the persons around us, and to appreciate the spiritual side. And, this is applicable in different cases. And on a higher level, it's applicable to devotees who may be fully pure, but they still have some sort of covering, some material covering, which has given them some material fault. Whatever it may be, that they're not good at this or that, or may have some roughness in their speech or their nature, some awkwardness. It's part of some material shell that's there. But internally their spiritual nature is fully pure. There's that case, Then on the other hand, it also is applicable in the case of persons who are sincere practitioners, and they have a genuine spiritual side which is evolving, which is growing, but at the same time they're struggling with their lower nature. They still have some, material nature which they are trying to transcend, or they are trying to overcome. But we shouldn't let that, we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, as the expression goes. We should be able to perceive, despite that, their spiritual quality, their spiritual characteristic. There's a beautiful quote of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, which I always find very helpful, where he says that the intellectual and mental planes, they are distinct from the spiritual. The spiritual aspect, the spiritual characteristic is independent of the mental and intellectual planes. So we don't want to be, distracted by these superficial things. We want to try to overlook that, although it can be very difficult. And this very Vedic analogy is given of the Ganges. That everyone in India knows the Ganges is not only pure, but has the capacity to purify, despite the fact that superficially one may see that there are impurities within the water. And we could take a Western, more easy example perhaps for Westerners to relate to outside of the Vedic world, that if you say you have medicine, that's in an old bottle. You have some very valuable, precious medicine, but the packaging is not very good. The bottle may be a little old, but you know that the medicine is going to work. The medicine is potent. So in the same way, we will try to see the Vaishnavas like that, And this analogy is given of a swan, right? And the great saints, the great Vaishnavas are referred to as great swans, Paramahamsas, because they have this ability to extract milk from water. Our Gurudev's Aditi song, there's this wonderful line, one of my favorite lines, Stapila Shrama Bahu Jagatamajhade Paramahamsa Dharma Gyan Shikshada Pachad, that you have established temples all over the world. For what purpose? Paramahamsa Dharma, to establish the Dharma, to spread the practice of this Dharma, this of the Paramahamsa, means we have to learn how to seek the essence. how to see the essence, how to relate with one another with this higher, more essential way of perceiving things. And of course, this principle of trinadapi sunichena troiva sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari, to be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, to give all honor to others without expecting it for ourselves. These principles, kirtaniya sadahari, these will qualify us for chant. These will support our chanting of the holy name. But a big part of this is also that these principles will protect us from making offenses, entering into a critical, envious mentality of other Vaishnavas. And this is the one thing which is the most important to remember in our approach towards the Lord and the holy name. It's all interconnected. The holy name will be pleased with us if we are honoring the Vaishnavas. So, of course, this is the thing, right, that we don't know. And our Gurudev would always say, we don't know who is a sadhu. We cannot always recognize with our eyes and with our prejudiced way of seeing things. So therefore, these principles, humility, tolerance, and respect, they safeguard us, they protect us. So if we're not sure, we will give our respect and keep some distance. And if we are blessed, then the Vaishnava will be, who is a real Vaishnava, will be revealed to us. And there's an expression, I believe of Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, that Gurudev quotes, saying that, I'm very unfortunate because I'm not able to recognize the Vaishnavas. But if they are merciful, they will reveal themselves to me. So I'm praying for that mercy. So this is our prayer, that we will be granted the eye to recognize that revelation will come to us. Who is a genuine Vaishnava? Whose association is helpful for us? From some external consideration, they may not have so many wonderful qualities. They may not be so qualified on the sattvic side, from the calculation of goodness, piety, mundane goodness, mundane piety, like the stereotyped conception. They may not be so outstanding, but beneath that is some spiritual quality. And so we pray for that type of eye, that vision, that revelation to come to us. And there are a number of different stories which our Gurudev and Param Gurudev would tell to illustrate this point. One famous one our Gurudev liked to tell, I believe it's in Mahabharata, very famous. Most of you know this story, I'm sure. This hunter he came across some stone that he thought was the perfect size and weights to use on his scales for weighing meat in his butcher's shop. And so he started using it on his scales, this stone. And then one day, one Brahmin, very Paka Brahmin, came by and observed this, and he became, enraged, and he chastised that man, saying, "Don't you see? This is actually a Shalagram Shila. This was actually a deity of Lord Narayan in the Shila, in the stone form." And so he was utterly appalled, and he chastised that man. He said, "What are you doing using this in such a filthy way?" And he took that Shila, that stone, and brought it to his home and worshipped it right in the most perfect way, and perfect offerings, perfect mantras, etc. But that night, Lord Narayan, Lord Vishnu, came to him and said, "Oh, why did you take me away? I was having a very good time on that swing, going up and down." So somehow that man, he was a hunter, he was an impious man. He was dealing with flesh of animals. But somehow there was something natural, something in his heart that attracted the Lord. And he was not attracted by this rigid, formal nature of this Brahmin who was doing everything perfectly according to scriptural prescriptions. So it is an interesting story to consider, that we don't know it. Who has the real heart, who has the real thing, maybe the most unexpected person. In fact, our Gurudev also made the point that, being very auspicious and very pious and very perfect in our behavior can actually work against us. Why? Because that tends to enhance our ego, our pride, pratishta. And that is one of the greatest dangers for our spiritual life. We may have so many wonderful qualities, but if one drop of pride is there, just like Gurudev gave the analogy, you may have a pot of milk that you've just milked from the cow, perfect, beautiful, pure milk. If one drop of urine enters that milk, the whole thing is spoiled. So we may be practicing very perfectly, but if we have a tiny drop of pride in that, then it all becomes unattractive all of a sudden. On the other hand, someone who cannot practice well, cannot do everything perfectly, this will naturally bring about a feeling of humility, feeling of dependency, will promote the feeling of sharanagati, taking the need to take surrender, to take shelter of the Lord. So the person in the lower position may actually be in a higher position, and vice versa. So we have to keep all of these things in mind. Another point I wanted to mention too, another example we can say, it was involving Srila Sridhar Maharaj actually, that there was one man in the Gaudiya Math, the mission of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, was one of the principal members of the mission, extremely active, and not just active, but he was like one of the right hands of Srila Prabhupada Saraswati Thakur. And so he had access to all the resources of the mission. And so at one time it came out that he was exploiting some of these resources, using them for his own benefit and that of some family members. And so, naturally, many persons were very upset. They were up in arms about this, and they tried to bring it to Srila Saraswati Thakur. But interestingly, he did not respond. He didn't address it. He let it be. And these persons were becoming a little frustrated. Why Prabhupada's not listening to us? And so they finally went to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, our guru, our grandfather guru, and represented this issue and said, Prabhupada is not listening to us, but he will listen to you. You please try to do something about this matter. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj was very reluctant. He didn't like to become involved in these kinds of issues at all. But he felt pushed by his godbrothers, and he finally felt, he must fulfill their desire, their request. And so he went to Srila Saraswati Thakur. And Saraswati Thakur was actually quite disappointed in him. And he said, even you, he said, I can understand if the others are coming to me like this, but even you are coming to me. And the main idea which he expressed was that he appreciated that individual service so much that if they were taking something for themselves, he didn't even want to consider that. And one of the things he said was like, why do we want to be so attached to money? He said, if necessary, he said, we can throw money in the Ganges. We can throw money in the river. We're not all about hoarding money. So he also said something like, this devotee is so important to me and so valuable. Even if everybody else left and I only had him, we could start everything over again. So this is another interesting point, going on a tangent. Just how we have this human beings. We are finite, right? We see things in a very finite, limited way, and there's a tendency to be petty, which can be very sad. Like you lose the big picture. You see some little thing that someone's done wrong, even like to the point of like they didn't wash their plate in the sink, and everybody gets upset about it. You forget about the $1,000 that they gave yesterday, or the beautiful feast that they prepared this afternoon, all the other wonderful things they're doing. You forget, and you get caught up in the pettiness of the moment, right? This is something I've been thinking about lately. So that's another point. But back to our story. Srila Saraswati Thakur didn't want to hear anything bad about this person. And so it ended there. Then, interestingly, 6 months later, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he was traveling with Srila Saraswati Thakur, and they were maybe in Madras. And one afternoon, Saraswati Thakur was sitting in his room reading Srimad Bhagavatam, going through the pages of Bhagavatam, and all of a sudden he stopped and he told he had a servitor attending him, bring Sridhar Maharaj. And so Srila Sridhar Maharaj was brought, And Saraswati Thakur pointed to this shloka and he said, here's the answer to your question. Here's the answer to your question. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj was a little taken aback, a little puzzled. What does he mean? I didn't ask any question. And then Saraswati Thakur chanted the verse, the svabhāva-mulam bhajata-priyasya chaktanya bhavasya hari paresha vikarma yat chot patitam katanchid dunoti sarvam hridi sanishti sanivishta. Saying that if someone who has fully given themselves to the Lord, they may, because they're still carrying some remnants of their previous habits, activity, they may somehow or another accidentally make some mistake. They may have some fall down. And then it says, however, that should not be considered because the Lord is within their heart. And the Lord is, they are personally, not only is the Lord in their heart in some type of dormant way, passive way, but the Lord is actively taking care of them, purifying. The Lord will purify them. They've entered the Lord's personal group. The Lord will personally take care of them, purify them, maintain them. So it is not for us to judge them, punish them, criticize them. It's an in progress program, right? Simply put. So it's like, let that be. That's all going on as it's going on, and it's in the Lord's care and the Lord's hands. We don't need to concern ourselves with that. But of course, it can be difficult, depending on the seriousness of what the nature of the person's fault is. It can be difficult, And, of course, depending on the individual case, there may be cases where there may need to be some protection, some adjustment, some correction for the safety, welfare, well-being of others, whether it's physical or mental or emotional. There may need to be some correction, but we should keep in mind that doesn't harm their spiritual quality. That their spiritual, we should maintain our appreciation for their spiritual side, despite what faults they have on the material side. Like that swan taking the milk from the water. We should maintain that. We shouldn't just cast them aside. Oh, now they are nothing because of this fault. It is very important because we can damage our own future. We do not want to be drain inspectors. That was an expression that Srila Sridhar Maharaj liked. It was one Western scholar, woman, Catherine Maya, who visited India, and she visited so many places, saw and heard so many things. And then at the end, when she left, she publicly criticized India because of, problems with poverty, cleanliness, these things. And Mahatma Gandhi heard that. He was very sad. She came as a guest, as like an honored guest, visitor to India. And this is how she repays that. And so Gandhi was very saddened by that. And he made a comment that, she came to India and she could not see any of the beautiful things here. She was just a drain inspector. She inspected the drains of India. This was his comment. So in the same way, the devotees are before us. There are so many beautiful things to see. So many flowers and ornaments and domes and those beautiful things. We're entering the temple. There's so many beautiful things here. Why are we going to go around the back and peer into the drain? There's also one Bengali expression our Gurudev would quote, Pipilika, saying that an ant, it's interesting to think about, an ant enters into a temple of jewels, but only searches for the crack, right? And this is something I saw in India all the time. They literally eat through concrete, marble, you name it, computers, alarm clocks. So an ant may enter this beautiful temple of jewels. They're just looking for the cracks. They're looking for the hole, looking for the holes. So we don't want to be like that. And another thing is that if we are focusing on the faults, that Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, it is like chewing poison. It's like one of the trade secrets of Vaishnavism. If we are chewing poison, it comes to us. So if we chew on the faults of the devotees, we will absorb that ourselves. They'll be okay. They're going to get over it. They're in the shower. The dirt's coming off. But then we're unnecessarily taking that upon ourselves, holding on to that. On the other hand, if we appreciate the devotees, then we will gain by that. Appreciation, it is really the most important quality. Envy is the most serious problem, nirmatsar, and appreciation, the capacity to appreciate, that is our best quality. That is the essence of Vaishnavism, the ability to honor, appreciate, love the Vaishnavas. So many other things that could be said, but we'll try not to make this go too long. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll continue tomorrow with the next one. Next verse 7. Jai Shri Gurudev, Jai Shri Upadeshamrita Ki Jai.